On a cold September morning in 2009, before most of Stockholm was fully awake, a helicopter descended onto the roof of a cash depot in Växtberga. It was not a police operation. It was not an emergency response. It was the crime itself. In a country known for order, planning, and quiet efficiency, the image felt almost surreal. A helicopter on the roof, armed men moving through the top of a secure building, explosions inside, police arriving below, and for a few crucial minutes, the people meant to stop the robbery could do little but watch. What happened that morning would become known as the Växtberga helicopter robbery, or simply the helicopter heist. Even now, it still sounds like a screenwriter's pitch rather than a police case file, but it was real. The raid took place on the 23rd of September, 2009, at the G4S cash facility south of Stockholm, and it quickly took on the status of modern criminal folklore because of how audacious it was, how carefully it was planned, and how exposed it made the authorities look in real time. Years later, Netflix would build a series around it, which tells you everything about how unforgettable the central image still is. The location mattered. This was not a random target, and it was not an impulsive robbery. A cash depot is the kind of place designed around routine, security layers, restricted access, and controlled movement. If you want to hit a place like that, you do not just need nerve. You need timing, logistics, and the confidence to believe you understand the building and its weaknesses better than the people protecting it. That is what made this case so unnerving. The robbers did not behave like desperate men. They behaved like men who thought they had already solved the problem before they ever arrived. When the raid began, the gang used a helicopter to reach the roof of the G4S facility. From there, they forced their way in from above. Witnesses reported explosions. G4S itself said the attackers used helicopters and explosives to enter the premises. Staff inside were shaken but physically unharmed, which only added to the strange coldness of the whole operation. This was not a frenzied bloodbath. It was a high-speed extraction. Get in, break through, get the money, and leave before the system around you can reorganize itself. And that is exactly what made the heist so effective. Most robberies rely on panic. This one relied on tempo. By the time the wider response began to form, the robbers had already shaped the battlefield. Police who arrived on the ground were not stepping into a normal scene. They were responding to something already in motion, already elevated above them, already designed to be over before a standard response could catch up. The helicopter gave the gang a psychological advantage as much as a practical one. It turned the crime vertical. It made the roof the entry point and the sky the escape route. One detail pushed the story from bold robbery into legend. Police air support was delayed because of a suspicious bag near a police helicopter, forcing authorities to call in another helicopter from Gothenburg. In other words, the men carrying out the robbery did not just plan for guards and locks, they planned for the police response too. That was the chilling part. They were not merely stealing money, they were controlling time. Every delay mattered. Every minute they bought themselves widened the gap between the crime and the pursuit. By the end of it, the gang had escaped with an estimated 39 million kronor, roughly $5.30 to $5.8 million in the reporting around the case. Prosecutors would later stress the sheer scale of the haul, with Swedish radio reporting that the prosecutor described it as the second biggest booty in Swedish criminal history. That kind of number changes the tone of a case. It stops being a flashy stunt and becomes a major national embarrassment. This was not only spectacular, it was profitable, or at least it looked that way in the first hours after the robbery. The helicopter itself was later found abandoned north of Stockholm, so now the image changed. The machine that had made the gang seem untouchable was suddenly just another piece of evidence sitting in the landscape. The public often remembers the glamorous phase of a crime first, the boldness, the precision, the escape. But the story always changes once the machine is cold, the noise is gone, and investigators start asking quieter questions. Who knew what? Who talked? Who made a mistake? Who assumed they had more time than they really did? and there were mistakes, or at least trails. By July 2010, Swedish prosecutors had indicted 10 men. Radio Sweden reported that the investigation had gathered DNA evidence and telephone taps supplied by Serbian police. That is the other half of a great heist story. People imagine perfect silence after the escape, but real conspiracies almost always expand the number of people who know something. The larger the operation, the harder it is to keep every moving part clean. A job involving aircraft, explosives, coordination, timing, and false leads does not shrink risk, it multiplies. When the verdict came in October 2010, 7 of the 10 accused men were convicted, and 3 were acquitted. The pilot received 7 years in prison at that stage. Another man tied directly to the robbery also received 7 years. Others were given shorter sentences. But even then, the story still felt unfinished, because police believed more people may have been involved, and because the money itself had not truly come back. A heist is one story when the suspects vanish into myth. It becomes a different story when men start sitting in court and the money is still mostly missing. Then came the appeal. In early 2011, Swedish radio reported that prosecutors were seeking stiffer penalties, arguing that the scale of the theft and the ruthlessness of the operation justified tougher punishment. Soon after, the local reported that the CV Court of Appeal raised penalties for several key men. The pilot and a man who entered the depot had their sentences increased from 7 to 8 years. Another participant, seen as central to the planning, had his sentence increased as well. Even after the convictions, the state was still trying to settle on exactly how severe this crime had been. But the part that keeps the case alive is not only the helicopter or the rooftop entry. It is the uncomfortable fact that only a small fraction of the money was ever recovered. Reporting after the appeal said that less than 100,000 kronor had been found. That means the ending never fully satisfied the public imagination. Yes, men were convicted. Yes, the state responded. But if the money mostly vanished, then a piece of the robbery remained undefeated. And that is how certain crimes stay culturally alive. They leave behind a visible victory for the law and an invisible victory for the criminals at the same time. There is also a deeper reason this case endures. It struck at an idea people like to believe about modern security. We tell ourselves that systems fail because of force, chaos, or surprise. This robbery suggested something worse. Systems can fail because someone studied them long enough to understand exactly where the response would hesitate. The vault mattered, yes. The money mattered, yes. But the real target may have been predictability itself. The robbers bet that institutions move in patterns. For a few extraordinary minutes, they were right. That is why the helicopter matters so much in the story. It was not just transportation, it was theater. It transformed the robbery from a hidden break-in into a public humiliation. Had the men arrived in vans and left through a side exit, the case would still have been serious, but it would not have become mythic. The helicopter turned the crime into an image that people could not forget. It made the robbery feel airborne, cinematic, almost impossible. It forced everyone watching to confront the same thought. If they can do that, what else can be done? And yet, for all its brilliance, it still failed in the oldest way. Human beings were involved. However disciplined the planning may have been, an operation on that scale creates pressure, communication, relationships, evidence, and memory. Eventually, prosecutors built a case. Eventually, a courtroom replaced the rooftop. Eventually, the men at the center of the legend were no longer silhouettes descending from the sky. They were defendants. That is the quiet correction at the heart of the story. A perfect crime does not stop being a crime just because it looks like a movie. Still, the legend survives because the visual remains undefeated. Dawn over Stockholm, a helicopter above a cash depot, explosions below, police delayed, millions gone. Even with convictions, even with appeals, even with the glamour stripped away by time, the image still lands. Maybe because it exposed how thin the line can be between security and spectacle. Or maybe because it forced a simple, unnerving truth into the open. Sometimes the people planning the crime are thinking further ahead than the people paid to stop it. And that is the final sting in the helicopter heist. It was not remembered because it was violent. No one inside the depot was physically injured, according to the reporting. It was remembered because it was discipline, because it looked control, because it made a nation watch a robbery unfold in a way that felt almost engineered for disbelief. In the end, prison caught up with key participants. But for one extraordinary morning in 2009, a gang of robbers turned the sky into an escape route and made one of Europe's most memorable heists feel impossible until it was already over.